Eat leftovers with my dog. My son's wife ordered me. The room went silent the moment she said it. Not the comfortable kind of silence, but the kind that presses against your chest and makes your heart beat louder than it should be. I stood there, holding the plate she shoved toward me, the smell of cold scraps rising into the air, while her words echoed again and again in my head. Eat leftovers with my dog. Not asked, ordered, said with the kind of casual cruelty that only comes from someone who thinks they hold power over you. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't even look at my son at first. I simply felt something settle deep inside me, something heavy, something final. At 74 years old, I had been called many things in my life. Poor, old-fashioned, stubborn, but never had I been reduced to less than an animal in my own son's house. And in that moment, I realized something important. Humiliation, when absorbed quietly, can become something far more powerful than anger. I looked down at the plate. Cold meat, half-eaten bread. Food scraped together without care. The dog sat nearby, tail wagging, unaware of the insult unfolding beside him. My daughter-in-law stood with her arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at her lips, as if she were testing how far she could push me. My son avoided my eyes, busying himself with his phone, pretending not to notice. That hurt more than her words ever could. I nodded once, calm, controlled. I took the plate and walked toward the small dining table in the corner. Each step felt deliberate, measured. Years ago, I learned that reacting too quickly gives control to the wrong people. Silence, on the other hand, makes them uneasy. I sat down slowly, placed the plate in front of me, and folded my hands. I didn't touch the food. She laughed under her breath. "See?" she said, loud enough for me to hear. "He knows his place." That sentence stayed with me. Knows his place. As if a lifetime of work, sacrifice, and quiet planning could be erased by a few sharp words spoken in someone else's kitchen. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had never stopped being careful. Never stopped preparing. Never stopped thinking 3 steps ahead. Even when people assumed I was just an old man living off memories. 20 minutes passed. In that time, I thought about everything. About the nights I stayed up working when my son was small. About the choices I made so he could have opportunities I never did. About the reason I moved in with them temporarily, trusting that family still meant something. I thought about how quickly respect disappears when people mistake kindness for weakness. The house buzzed with ordinary sounds. A television murmuring in the background. Dishes clinking. Laughter from her phone as she scrolled through messages. No one spoke to me. No one checked on me. I existed only as a presence they felt entitled to ignore or command. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't rush to answer it. I let it buzz once more before slowly pulling it out. The screen lit up with a name that instantly changed the weight of the room for me. My expression didn't change, but something inside me steadied. I excused myself quietly, stood up, and walked toward the hallway. My daughter-in-law rolled her eyes. "Don't take too long," she said. "Dinner's almost over." I stepped into the guest room and closed the door gently behind me. The moment I answered the call, the tone shifted completely. The voice on the other end was respectful, urgent, careful with every word. As the conversation unfolded, I felt something I hadn't felt all evening. Clarity. When I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, breathing slowly. The miracle hadn't happened yet, but it was already in motion, quietly, precisely, the way real change always arrives. I returned to the dining area. The plate of leftovers was still there, untouched. The dog lay beside the table, asleep. My daughter-in-law glanced at me, irritation flickering across her face. "Well," she asked, "you going to eat or what?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time that night, I smiled, not because I was amused, but because I knew something she didn't single quotes T dot, and in less than 20 minutes. The balance of that house and her understanding of who I really was about to change forever. I sit back down at the table. The plate of leftovers still untouched in front of me. The room feels smaller now, tighter, as if the walls themselves are listening. My daughter-in-law keeps talking, her voice sharp, filling the space with complaints about work, money, and how exhausting it is to take care of everyone. My son nods along, still not looking at me. I say nothing. Silence, when used correctly, makes people reveal themselves. Inside, my mind is steady. The phone call plays over and over in my head, every word precise, every detail confirming what I already knew was coming. I don't rush it. Rushing spoils lessons. I let the seconds stretch. I let them believe nothing has changed. She glances at the plate again and scoffs. If you're not going to eat it, don't waste food, she snaps. The dog doesn't mind. I look at the dog, loyal, quiet, unaware of the insult being shared between us. Then I look back at her and nod once, calmly. I won't waste anything, I say softly. That seems to irritate her more than anger would have. She wants reaction. She wants submission she can feel. Instead, she gets calm. And calm unsettles people who thrive on control. A few minutes later, there's a knock at the front door. Not loud, not aggressive. Just firm, professional. She frowns, confused. Were you expecting someone? She asks my son. He shakes his head. No, I don't move. I sip my water slowly, eyes down, as if nothing is happening. The knock comes again, followed by a voice polite, confident, unmistakably official. My daughter-in-law hesitates, then walks to the door, irritation already forming on her face. When she opens it, the tone of the house shifts instantly. Two well-dressed men stand outside. Calm, composed, the kind of posture that doesn't ask for permission. One of them speaks first, his voice even and respectful. Good evening. We're here regarding the property and the outstanding arrangements connected to it. Her smile fades. What arrangements? She asks sharply. This is our house. The man nods slightly. Not exactly. My son stands up now, confused, uneasy. What's going on? He asks. I remain seated. The men step inside, removing their shoes carefully, methodically. One of them pulls out a folder, thick with documents. The air feels heavy. My daughter-in-law's confidence begins to crack, just slightly, like glass under pressure. There must be some mistake, she says. We didn't authorize anything. The man turns his gaze toward me for the first time. His expression changes instantly. Respect, recognition. Sir, he says, inclining his head slightly. Thank you for waiting. Everything is prepared, just as discussed. That's when the room goes completely silent. My daughter-in-law turns slowly, her eyes locking onto me. What is this? She asks. I stand slowly, joints stiff but movements deliberate. You told me to eat leftovers with the dog, I say calmly. So I waited. That's all. My son looks between us, panic creeping into his voice. Dad, what's happening? I gesture gently toward the table, toward the untouched plate. I've lived long enough to know that humiliation is often a test, I say. And tests reveal more about the person giving them than the one receiving them. The men begin explaining. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just facts. Ownership. Agreements. Timelines. Legal structures that were put in place years ago. Safeguards. Conditions. Responsibilities that had been ignored. My daughter-in-law's face drains of color with every sentence. This can't be right, she whispers. We've been paying, yes, one of the men replies calmly. But you were never the primary authority. She turns to me again, eyes wide now. You said you were just staying temporarily. I was, I reply, temporarily observing. The miracle doesn't arrive like thunder. It arrives like gravity, quiet, unavoidable, absolute. The power dynamic she thought she controlled dissolves in real time. Her voice trembles now. Her posture shrinks. The arrogance that filled the room earlier has nowhere to stand. My son finally looks at me, really looks at me, as if seeing me for the first time in years. "Dad," he says softly. I meet his gaze. There's no anger in my eyes. Just disappointment. Respect isn't about where you live, I tell him. It's about how you treat the people who gave you everything. The men close the folder. "We'll return tomorrow to finalize the next steps," one of them says politely. "Thank you for your cooperation." They leave as quietly as they arrived. No shouting. No threats. Just truth. My daughter-in-law sinks into a chair, breathing shallow, staring at the floor. The plate of leftovers still sits untouched between us. The dog lifts his head briefly, then lies back down. I pick up the plate and walk toward the trash. "No one eats like this in my presence," I say evenly. I throw the food away. And in that moment, something breaks inside her, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. She finally understands. The miracle wasn't money. It wasn't power. It was clarity. And it had only just begun. The house doesn't recover after that night. It sits in a strange stillness, like a place that has just learned a secret it can't forget. My daughter-in-law barely sleeps. I can hear her pacing long after midnight, her footsteps uneven, stopping and starting as reality slowly tightens around her. My son stays quiet, distant, as if afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter what little stability remains. Morning comes, but it doesn't bring relief. She avoids my eyes at breakfast. No commands. No sharp remarks. Just silence and the faint clatter of a spoon against a cup. The confidence she wore like armor is gone. In its place is something fragile: uncertainty. She keeps checking her phone, reading messages, hoping for reassurance that never comes. By noon, the calls start. Her voice shifts each time she answers. First defensive, then pleading, then flat. Every conversation ends the same way. No help, no shortcuts. No one willing to stand between her and the truth. Whatever safety she thought she had built around herself dissolves piece by piece. I sit in the living room, calm, watching the light move across the walls. I don't interfere. Lessons like this don't need commentary. They need time. She finally breaks in the afternoon. She stands in front of me, arms folded tightly around herself, eyes red. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" she asks, her voice strained. "Why did you let me think? Why did you let me treat you like that?" I look at her for a long moment before answering. "Because respect that's forced isn't real," I say. "And kindness that's taken for granted stops being kindness. I waited to see who you were when you thought there were no consequences." Her lips tremble. "I didn't think. I didn't know." "No," I reply calmly. "You didn't want to know." That lands harder than anger ever could. She sinks into the chair across from me, head in her hands. For the first time, she looks small. Not weak, but human. Stripped of entitlement. Stripped of illusion. Later that day, the men return. This time, there's no confusion when the door opens. No defiance. She steps aside immediately, her posture careful, almost respectful. The discussion is longer now, detailed, methodical. Each sentence confirms what she's already begun to understand. Nothing was ever truly hers to command. My son listens quietly, shame written across his face. When it's over, he finally speaks. "Dad, I should have stopped it." "I didn't." I nod slowly. "Silence can be louder than insults," I say. "Remember that." That evening she doesn't cook. She doesn't order anyone around. Instead, she cleans. Slowly, thoughtfully, as if each action is an apology she doesn't yet know how to say out loud. When dinner comes, she places a proper plate in front of me. Fresh food, warm, carefully prepared. She hesitates before speaking. "I'm sorry," she says. The words are quiet, but they're real. I don't answer immediately. I eat a bite first. Then I look at her. "Apologies don't erase behavior," I say. "But they can begin repair. What matters is what you do next." She nods, swallowing hard. That night I hear crying softly behind the bedroom door. Not out of fear but realization. The kind that changes a person if they let it. The next morning, she's already awake when I come into the kitchen. Coffee is ready. The table is set. She waits until I sit before she speaks. "I thought power was control," she says quietly. "Now I see its responsibility." I meet her eyes. "And dignity," I add. "Dignity is how you treat people when you think no one can stop you." She nods again, eyes lowered. Over the following days, the shift becomes undeniable. She asks instead of orders. She listens instead of interrupts. She includes instead of dismisses. The house feels different, not because authority has changed, but because understanding has arrived. But the final test hasn't come yet, because humility, learned in safety, is easy. The real miracle is whether it survives consequence. And soon, she will face the moment that proves whether this change is temporary or permanent. The miracle doesn't arrive all at once. It unfolds slowly, quietly, over time, like something living that grows roots before it ever shows itself on the surface. The days after that night are different. Not peaceful, not comfortable, just honest. The house feels like it's holding its breath, as if every wall remembers what happened and is waiting to see what comes next. My daughter-in-law moves through the rooms carefully now. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Each step is measured, each action considered. The woman who once filled every space with her voice now listens to the sound of her own footsteps. I notice the smallest things. She no longer drops her bag wherever she pleases. She no longer speaks over others. She pauses before talking, like she's weighing her words instead of throwing them. That tells me more than any apology ever could. A few days later, reality tightens its grip. She comes home early one afternoon, earlier than I've ever seen her. Her car door closes softly. No slamming. No phone pressed to her ear. She walks inside slowly, sets her bag down, and just stands there. My son asks what's wrong, but she shakes her head, unable to answer yet. She sits at the table and stares at her hands. "They let me go today," she finally says. No anger, no blaming. Just truth. She explains how her supervisor spoke to her, not cruelly, not loudly, but firmly. About complaints. About patterns. About how the way she treated people beneath her had finally reached the wrong ears. The same tone she once used so casually had followed her back into her own life. "I didn't recognize myself," she says quietly. "They described me, and I didn't recognize the person they were talking about." I nod. "That's what mirrors do," I say calmly. "They don't lie. They just show us what we've been avoiding." That night, she doesn't retreat into distractions. She doesn't scroll her phone or bury herself in noise. She sits at the kitchen table long after midnight, the lights low, thinking. I pass by once and see her staring at the same spot on the wall, eyes wet but focused. This isn't self-pity. This is reckoning. The next morning, I wake to the smell of fresh coffee. The table is set neatly. She stands nearby, waiting, not nervously, not stiffly, but respectfully. When I sit, she sits only after. "I need to speak," she says. I nod. "What I did that night wasn't just wrong," she continues. "It was cruel. I spoke to you like you weren't human. Like you were something I could command without consequence." Her voice trembles, but she keeps going. "I don't expect forgiveness," I don't even know if I deserve to stay here. I just need you to know that I finally understand what I did. That's the moment I know the miracle has fully taken hold. Not because she's apologizing. Not because she's afraid. But because she's taking responsibility without bargaining. I didn't react because I wanted revenge, I tell her quietly. I didn't react because I wanted you to learn something anger can't teach. Dignity doesn't scream. It waits. And sometimes it lets people show who they really are. Tears fall then, slow, silent. She doesn't wipe them away quickly. She lets them exist. I'll never forget that plate, she says. Or the way you didn't defend yourself. That's because dignity doesn't need defense, I reply. It survives humiliation. Arrogance doesn't. Over the next weeks, the change proves itself through action, not words. She begins working again, this time humbly, carefully, starting lower than before. She accepts correction without resentment. At home, she takes responsibility without being asked. She listens. She waits. She learns. My son changes too. He speaks up when something feels wrong. He no longer hides behind silence. Sometimes one person facing consequences forces everyone else to grow as well. One evening, she cooks dinner. A proper dinner. She sets the table carefully and places a plate in front of me first. She doesn't rush. She sits across from me and waits until I begin eating. I used to think power meant control, she says quietly. Now I know it means restraint. And awareness, I add. And how you treat people when you think you're above them. She nods. I'll carry this lesson with me for the rest of my life. Weeks later, as the sun sets and the house settles into calm, I sit alone for a moment on the porch. I think back to that night. The leftovers. The dog. The command spoken so casually, so cruelly. And I understand something fully. The miracle wasn't that she lost power. The miracle was that arrogance died without a fight. That dignity survived humiliation. That respect was rebuilt from truth, not fear. At my age, I've learned this lesson well. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. Justice doesn't need cruelty. And sometimes the strongest response is patience, and the wisdom to let people face themselves. She never ordered me again. She never spoke down to me again. And I never had to raise my voice. That was the miracle. Not something that happened to her. Something that happened within her. And that kind of miracle lasts a lifetime.